K98 Talk is expanding its lineup for 2015. This means we are expanding our advertising base. Whether you're a startup trying to push through to the next level or an established business trying to supplement your advertising budget, web-based advertising is a solid investment. Thanks to Talk's newest partnership with TuneIn Radio and instant access to our sister station, K98 FM, we give you worldwide access at a reasonable cost. Interested parties should email us at sales@k98fm.com. K98talk.com, a leader in internet radio. So grab your seatbelts and take the ride of your life on K98talk.com.
This is Liberty Unfiltered, and here's your host, Steve Long.
Hey folks, it is Liberty Unfiltered, and I am your host, Steve Long. Thanks for tuning in tonight. We are streaming here on Vigilant Liberty Radio, and also picking us up is K98 Talk, as well as the Spark Radio Network. We're going to have a really great show for you tonight. Tonight, my guest is an author, a CEO, a publisher, and a well-known libertarian. Please welcome with me to the show, Mr. Jeffrey Tucker. Hey, Jeff, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
All right, thanks for coming on the show tonight. It's good to have you.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Good, good. You've been a busy man lately.
Yeah, it's true.
So, I wanted to start off with one of the projects that you've got working right now that you founded, I guess just a little over a year or so ago, called libertyme.me. When was it that you founded that?
Well, it was a long founding because I think I first conceived of the idea in the spring of 2013, and then I began to sort of shop for some investment money. That took a good part of the summer and the fall, and then we started building, I guess, maybe November 1 of 2013, and we didn't finally open our doors until May. But it was a beta project at the time, and only about 3 or 4 weeks ago did we come out with something approaching what we're calling our final release, and it's a much better version. That's the thing you learn about enterprise, is that it's a long process of trial and error. And the beautiful thing about commerce is that you get this constant feedback sense. So you know what's working and what's not. So you're not sort of just blindly developing. You're actually serving a customer base. And that's really what Liberty Me is all about. It's a kind of platform for the global liberty community to publish and to share ideas.
Right. And for those of you out there that don't know what it is, liberty.me is... it's a social media platform, but it's kind of more than that, wouldn't you say? It's gotten to a point now where it's not just a platform which liberty-minded individuals can talk and share ideas and express views, but it's gotten now to where you have video blogs going on. You have podcasts on there. One of the newer things that I've noticed on there, and I just noticed a couple of months ago, was a library where there's a very large amount of books that you can download.
Mm-hmm. About 150 of them, and we picked only the best classics, so they're all very, very much curated, and they're connected to discussions on the discussion forum. And then we also commissioned a whole series of guides on specific liberty-oriented topics that are designed to do the thing that I really founded the site for, which was a kind of a do-it-yourself liberty. I had gotten frustrated with two conventional strategies within the liberty world. One is political organizing, so that we have to just, wait for liberty until we can, get the right people elected. I mean, that's a very conventional kind of perspective, and I gave up on that a long time ago.
It's a very frustrating endeavor.
Yeah, it is, and I feel bad. It's funny because I see people fall in love with the idea of human liberty and say, "Oh my God, this is a great idea. This is what makes society work. This is what makes us prosperous. This is what makes life flourish." So what do I do now? Well, we need to get rid of the bad guys and get in some good guys. And, people fight that battle for a few years and get frustrated.
It's a very frustrating effort to try to win people over, especially I don't know about other areas, but I live in the Oklahoma City area, and trying to win the Republican Party over specifically on the idea of liberty is yes, very frustrating.
Yeah. We have a weird mythology as Americans. We think that there's a government or a state, and we understand that. But then we tend to think of the political parties as being somehow like separate from that, like builders or architects, and it's a kind of a team of people that get together based on our votes and kind of hammer away to forge the right policies, which is just not true. I mean, essentially, the political parties are created by and maintained by the ruling class, specifically to support the regime as it currently stands. I mean, that's their purpose and function.
Well, you know what? That's a good point you bring up, and I wonder if you can point me in the right direction on a question that's been brought up more and more often. But can you do you know of any historically speaking, any successful society that was pure individual liberty and zero state? I mean, has there ever
any more than you can point to a society where there's never been any thefts or murders? We live in an imperfect world. It's a matter of the ideals that we have and what direction we're tending towards. What we hope will happen really is ultimately the kind of society we're going to be driving towards. We'll never actually achieve it, and that's fine. But I think back to the American colonial experience as being probably one of the most perfect experiences we've ever had in a decentralized world without a central government, where there was really thriving freedom, and it built the beginnings of a great society. Also, I think about the princely states of Germany in the late 18th century and the early 19th century, where you might have had a lot of local despotisms, but you always had the freedom to move from one to the other, and so there was a competition, and you saw a real beautiful dawning of liberty in that world as well. So, and in more modern times, of course, Hong Kong is continues to be probably one of the most least intrusive governments in the world. You have other cases like Singapore is a similar situation, and I don't know how much you travel, but one of the things that strikes Americans who travel abroad is how little of the government actually intrudes into people's lives in places like Costa Rica or New Zealand. These are places that I've spent a lot of time, and I'm impressed at just the existence of what life looks like without a government that's even obvious in your life at all. In so many ways, people credit government for the fact that we have order. I think it's just wrong.
You're right. I've never been to Central America, but I have actually. You mentioned Singapore. I did spend some time there, and it's an interesting society they have over there. It's very heavily capitalist. I mean, it's for lack of a better term, really.
What it's all about. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so. I don't. I mean, I was at the time when I was there. I was in the service, so where I was living at the time was, of course, there was some government, but outside that area, it was almost like you didn't see any government out there at all.
No.
Now that you mention it, it's
yeah. Well, and I think Americans, we're very strange people because we like to imagine that we're free, but life has changed dramatically over the last 15 years in the United States, and it's changed like quickly and dramatically, but in ways that we don't entirely discern, or at least in ways that we adapt to very quickly. And it strikes you when you travel abroad, and by abroad I mean practically anywhere, just how much freer nearly everywhere feels compared with the U.S. these days. I mean, all of our local governments are heavily now funded through police that are collecting traffic fines all the time and arresting people all the time. And we've got a very large prison state. Governments just all around us. It drives me absolutely nuts. And when I travel abroad, you find yourself sort of feeling a sense of being able to breathe free for the first time. And I don't mean just countries that are objectively freer than the U.S., like Australia, New Zealand, and Canada nowadays even. But I mean in places like Austria, where you wouldn't think, that's sort of socialistic, but while there might be a lot, a heavy tax burden, that sort of thing, you don't have the nanny state just driving you crazy like you do in the U.S.
Yeah, and you're right. It has gotten worse. And
this is part of what drives me crazy. I mean, this sort of worsening of freedom. And the question is, what are we going to do about it? And I think politics is just not a very good path forward for us. I think we keep trying that, and we keep being tricked. Another thing that I think is a good thing, but it's limited, is this sort of educational campaigns that libertarians have always been on, And while I think education is good, I don't think it's enough. I'm really interested in an action-based liberty.
And that's a lot, I think, of what at least from my perspective, what Liberty.me is all about. It's not only about education, but it's always about also about getting people engaged and getting people active. But you're right. Libertarians can only do so much by educating people about liberty. They've got to get up and actually do something. And of course, like I said, the question is, what is it that we do? What are we going to do as libertarians?
Yeah, and I think that's what Liberty.me is all about. I mean, one is to more wisely protect yourself against the intrusions of the state. So we have guides for dealing with cops and that sort of thing. I have a guide on there on hacking your house so that you can have a well-functioning house without complying with all the regulations, which is certainly illegal. A lot of our products are shipped in compliance with federal regulations but are sort of reduced in their functionality, and you can hack them and do good things for them. You can be wiser in your money management. Stay out of debt and move to places with lower tax burdens. I mean, these are the kinds of practical things that people can do to make their own lives freer. And there's a lot you can do just by declining to go along with the central plan and being non-compliant wisely, but just not sort of always deferring. Being aware that you're being badgered and pushed around to do unwise things, being aware of that and running the contrary direction, you can actually, improve the amount of freedom you have in your own life.
And I think that's one of the biggest, I won't say problems, but that's the best word I can think of off the top of my head, with engaging people involved in politics, is making them aware of how much their liberties are being taken away.
Oh, it really is. People are not aware. People think that we're more or less free, but it's just not true. So much of what we do in the course of our lives is determined by a kind of de facto central plan. I think about when you have children, you face this very much. Even from the time you leave the hospital, you've got the state's clause, in you, in terms of all the mandates you have to face, and then you face a lot of pressure. You stick them in public daycare and
public schools,
public schools right away, and encourage them to sort of fit in with everybody else, be part of the great collective. Don't get too far ahead. You graduate from high school, go into deep debt for college, and so on. And it's a problem. It's a problem for people because unless you're willing to think outside the plan, chances are at some point in your life you're going to bump into a brick wall and go, "Oh my God, they lied to me. This life is not working out the way I wanted to." And this happens to so many young people, and I think it's just so sad.
But it's really great to see when those people wake up. It's very fulfilling in a way.
Yeah, I know so many young people who woke up and just realized, "Oh my God, I have just done so many dumb things for so long, gone along, done everything I was supposed to do, and it didn't work out for me. Now what am I going to do?" And this is a lot of what Liberty.me is focused on. So, for example, we have a guide that really examines in detail the Free State Project, which is this idea of moving to New Hampshire, which is a very low tax state, and living debt free, and having a nice community of support, and living a much freer life. I think these are good ideas. It's not that there's one answer, but there's thousands of answers to how you can improve the amount of freedom you have in life just by being conscious of it.
Right, and for those of you that have spent any time on this liberty.me site, you can find these various answers because there's so many different ideas on here. But
it'll keep you busy, that's for sure.
It definitely will. Another thing that's really great about it is it's almost refreshing when you spend. If you're a person that's engaged very heavily in social media in general, if you spend so much time or spend a lot of time on like Facebook and Twitter, and the conversations that you have in there, and they mentally exhaust you, and then you go to liberty.me, and it's just like, it's so refreshing, and you feel like, oh.
I know, that's what everybody says. Everybody says that they hadn't realized how much Facebook had become a kind of source of anxiety and tension in their lives until they got to liberty.me, and suddenly it's it's relaxing, and
exactly.
if you're around friends, that's the good thing.
Yeah, it's just
and we have differences, and we have vigorous arguments and that sort of thing. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's always civil, and we always are sort of valuing each other and appreciating each other for what we're doing. And I think part of that comes from our business model. We really wanted people to be invested in the platform, which is why we charge $5 a month for subscriptions, just so that it's a very minimal charge, but the idea is that everybody should feel some sense of belonging and having some skin in the game.
It's just that I think also it's just that everybody that is going to invest any kind of time or money into becoming a member of this, they all have, at least to some extent, a common goal. So that's why I think that a lot of the conversations on there, especially the disagreements, are way more civil than those that you would have in any Facebook group or page or Twitter thread. It's just. But you're right. It's a lot more civil and in their disagreements.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I believe in disagreements, and none of us entirely agree. It would be a boring world if we all entirely agreed. But you want to be able to engage with people in a way that you learn. Not just that you fight.
Right. And you, it's some people are just hard to work with by nature because they. We talked about how politics is less and less becoming the avenue to engage in topics of liberty. But there's a large group of people out there that see politics and feel that politics is almost like a religion. I mean, to them, it's very important for them to be engaged in that sort of thing, and they kind of treat it as a religion.
They really do. People become obsessed with politics, and we just got through the holiday season, so everybody knows this. We all spent time with our families, and there's nothing more annoying than having a nice Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner or something, and then one or two people at the table start mimicking Fox News commentators. You just kind of it ruins the whole scene.
Speaking of religion, there's another organization that you have worked with in the past, and I don't know if you still work with them or not, but I'm referring to the Acton Institute.
Yeah, I'm going there next week to deliver a big lecture.
Oh, okay. So tell me about that organization and how you got involved with them and what you're...
Well, I was there very much at the founding. I'm trying to think, what year was this? This might have been 1988, 89, something like that.
That's about right.
Yeah, and the idea was that people who are religious are an important but overlooked sort of a segment of opinion, a market segment for the ideas of liberty. So many libertarians are secularly oriented. I think that's for a number of reasons, but most Americans are deeply religious for one reason or another, at least are informed, their lives are informed by some religious tradition. So the purpose of the Acton Institute was to create a venue by which these two areas of life, religious concern and also human liberty with particular focus on economics, could come together and sort of a dialogue and in a way that would more thoroughly connect with people's lives. And also, for many people, they stop going to church because they getting tired of being hectored from the pulpit, by sort of leftist, socialistic thought. And so part of the mission of the Acton Institute was to actually educate the clerical class in economic subjects too. So, and I think they've been remarkably successful. And I enjoy working with them because it's an area that I've done a lot of research and writing in. And so I teach at the Acton University every year, and I've worked closely with the founder of the Acton Institute, Robert Spreaker, for a very long time.
I think a lot of problems, the only word I can think of that comes to me with libertarians and religion is that a lot of the, I won't say all, but a lot of the religious groups kind of turn them off. Especially here in Oklahoma, there is a very large social conservative movement of people that spread this word liberty around.
I totally agree. I mean, so many of the social conservatives are actually an active threat to liberty, even veering towards fascism and nationalism, and it's very scary. And just like an intolerant sort of way, and it gives a bad impression of religion to anybody who cares about their freedom. As you begin to think of religious people as a threat.
Right, and that's the problem we have down here in Oklahoma is so the people that are vocally religious, for lack of a better way to put it, are the people who say liberty this and liberty this, but they have these very vicious attitudes toward people that are not like them.
That's exactly right.
And we're actually going to talk a little bit more about that concept later on in the show in regards to something you wrote a while back, but we'll get into that later. But the interesting thing discussing the Acton Institute and this idea of merging liberty and religion, next week we're actually doing our show on I'm going to be doing a forum. There's going to be about 3 or 4 people on the show, and we're going to be talking about the compatibility of organized religion and liberty, and it should be an interesting show. But that's
I think they are compatible. By the way, I think that liberty is compatible with any of those, any kind of worldview you happen to have. I mean, I would say if you've got a socialistic ethos, an environmentalist perspective, if you're a witch, if you're practicing Islam, or I mean, it just doesn't matter. Human liberty is actually better for you than any kind of state control. So.
Right.
I mean, it's, to me, liberty. I don't like to think of libertarianism as being something like a small sector of political opinion. It seems to me it's the one perspective that's truly universal and good for everyone.
Right.
That was Mises' view in any case.
Yes. So you, next thing I wanted to talk about, you just released a new book. Bit by bit. I guess this is kind of a way to document this kind of revolution, so to speak, in peer-to-peer technology. You want to talk about that book a little bit?
Yeah, it really does address what I think is really a fantastic sort of development we've seen over the last 18 to 24 months. It's a maturing of the digital age, where we're starting to see the communication technology become so sophisticated that we can actually commodify and bundle and transfer information bits in a way that actually disintermediate the world, by which I mean we can bypass third-party providers and that sort of thing and engage with each other peer-to-peer. Without regard to political jurisdiction or geography. And this has been highly significant for our lives in many ways. And we're seeing all this sort of emergence of new technologies that are really just kind of like shredding through traditional ways that the state has tried to use to control society, from zoning laws to occupational licensing to municipal taxi services and even monetary monopolies. All these things are facing fundamental challenges from technology. So the purpose of the book is to document this and also defend this trend as being not just some random imposition of new technologies that we don't understand, but rather a kind of fulfillment of a human aspiration towards self-determination.
And the interesting thing is, in a lot of ways, technology more and more has gotten to the point where it's almost made government, that is the state, obsolete.
Yeah, and that's really the theme of the book, because for a very long time we couldn't really imagine how you could have a world of just individuals forming their own, or customizing their own worlds, putting together their own customized political systems or legal systems or trading without depending on very, very large governments or corporations or these kinds of things. We just didn't really have the technology. I think that a world without the state has always been possible, but it's never been more viable than it is.
Yeah, and all because of technology.
Yeah. I mean, so much of our lives now, I mean, like, if you think about it, like, every time you're looking down at your smartphone, you really are looking at a portal to a kind of a global anarchist vision. You're dealing peer-to-peer with people in the communications world that nobody gave approval for. The state never caused the smartphone to come into existence. The app economy is something that emerged completely out of the spontaneous actions of market participants and entrepreneurs. And it's been glorious. It's changed our lives, and so much of our lives are being sucked into this world. And I think this is for a reason. It's just a better world than the world the state made for us.
Right, definitely. So the blue book is called Bit by Bit, and the subtitle of it.
Yeah, it's Bit by Bit: How P2P is Freeing the World.
Right, and it's available on Amazon.
And it's the number one seller under the category of political freedom right now. So I'm very pleased. It was just released, I guess, 2 days ago, but it's doing very, very well, actually.
And if you are a member, microphone fell. If you are a member of Liberty.me, you can actually download it for free.
That's right.
So another perk of being a member of Liberty About Me. It's definitely something you should look into. Well, Jeff, we're going to go to a quick break.
Okay.
And when we get back, we'll talk about some other stuff, okay?
Sounds good.
Great. Well, you've been listening to Liberty Unfiltered with your host, me, Steve Long, and we're here with Jeffrey Tucker, and we'll be back in just a few moments.
Hi, I'm Dustin Hoyt with America Our Way, and you can hear me right here on Vigilant Liberty Radio at 10/9 Central on Thursday nights. We bring you the best in political commentary from the right-wing, conservative, libertarian perspectives coming together and bringing the best content on the internet. Be sure to tune in every week for your favorite shows. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
Here's just a sample of what you can expect when you listen to Amanda and the Edge of Anarchy Monday nights on Vigilant Liberty Radio.
So freedom and liberty can actually help the state. Take marijuana, for example. If we legalize it, we should force Congress to smoke it. I mean, can you imagine the outcome of that? Hey, Senator Reid, I got a great idea. Let's just not tax Taco Bell. Leave them alone. Maybe they'll, take a taco and put it in your burrito and...
That's the Edge of Anarchy with your host, Amanda, Monday nights at 9 on Vigilant Liberty Radio.
This is Vigilant Liberty Radio news from Independent Journal Review for January 14th. The Tampa Bay Police Department is investigating after a SWAT team killed a man and an informant later admitted to giving police false information that led to the raid. The man, Jason Westcott, was shot by police officers conducting a no-knock warrant at his home. Westcott, believing his home was being robbed, had grabbed his gun to protect himself. Police initially said the investigation of Westcott began because of neighbor complaints, but when reporters found no neighbors who had called the police and no records of complaints, the police department revised their assertion, saying the case began on a tip from an informant who bought marijuana from Westcott. The raid on Westcott's home did turn up marijuana, but the amount was only approximately $2 worth, and Westcott had no previous criminal record. In his first State of the State address, Arizona Governor Doug Ducey put an education at the front and center of his speech. Governor Ducey proposed the creation of the Arizona Public School Achievement District to provide new ways for more students to have equal access to the state's best-performing charter schools. More room would be made in part by turning over vacant space at district schools to charter and private schools and allowing the state to guarantee construction loan for charter schools, saving millions of dollars in interest payments. Governor Ducey's address also expressed openness to working with the minority Democrats and an attempt to balance the state's budget by freezing state employee hiring, except for public and child safety positions. U.S. taxpayers are paying more than $300 million to the Afghan National Police, but reports indicate a large portion of that money is going to officers who don't actually exist. According to an audit by the Special Investigator General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, the U.S. government continues to pay the overhead for the ANP, but there is no supervision over the allotment of funds. In a previous audit in 2011, the Special Investigator found many weaknesses in the payroll process, including unverified and lacking data. ANP identification cards have been implemented to help combat fraud, but the audit finds there are almost twice as many ID cards in circulation as there are active officers. And other attempts to combat fraud have not been effective either. And the story of Martin Pistorius, who fell ill to a rare and progressive disease while living in South Africa in 1988, is lighting up social media. The disease left Martin in a vegetative state, and doctors said they had run out of options. For 12 years, Martin's parents cared for him at home and with the help of a special care center. What they did not know is that Martin regained some mental consciousness 2 years after he fell ill. Trapped in his body but with a functioning mind, Martin battled depression and used his mental capabilities to regain some control over his life. As his mindset improved, so did his neurological developments, and at age 26, an evaluation determined Martin was able to identify what was going on around him. His mother quit her job and helped Martin regain motor function. Martin, now 39, went on to graduate college with a degree in computer science, started a web company, and wrote a book. He now lives in England with his wife. This has been Amy Curtis with your Vigilant Liberty Radio news from Independent Journal Review for January 14th.
Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Hi, this is Taylor Millard. Be sure to catch my show, Saturday Night Cigar Lounge, right here on Vigilant Liberty Radio. If you don't, I'll add you to my grudge list. Just ask the Washington Examiner's Ash Scow at Saturday Night Cigar Lounge here on Vigilant Liberty Radio.
And we're back on Liberty Unfiltered. I'm your host, Steve Long, and joining me tonight is the Chief Liberty Officer of Liberty.me, Jeffrey Tucker. Welcome back, Jeff.
Thanks so much.
I thought of something I wanted to ask you. Have you seen on social media this? It just happened a couple days ago. They started doing this these quizzes. Which libertarian celebrity are you?
I saw it. The first time I took it, I did not get myself.
I was going to ask, did you get yourself?
I did not the first time. I had to tweak it a little bit. And it was, I'm not sure what made the difference, but there was one question that said, do you curse? And I said, yes. And it turned out to be Chris Cantwell. And then I changed. So I changed my answer and I said I don't, and then it turned out to be me. So I guess according to the quiz, that's really the only difference between Cantwell and me is Kirsten.
That's interesting. I didn't get you either. I got Judge Knapp. Interestingly enough, my wife got you. So.
There's something funny about this whole celebritarian thing. People, they act as if it's like a job listing in a newspaper, and I applied for it and got it. That's actually not what happened at all. I never wanted to be that guy, and I've just been doing my work and doing a lot of speaking, that sort of thing. But at some point, this term came to be affixed to me, and I kind of regret it. But essentially, there's nothing you can really do about it. I've never really been a public person. I mean, I'm very happy to work in a small closet with no windows, and I could just sit on my laptop all day, and that's what makes me happy. But nowadays, I can't even be in any airport. I have to go to Australia, actually, to get privacy. And even there, I mean, I flew into Melbourne recently. There's a bunch of people recognize me, so I don't know. It's a little bit funny, and it's a little boring for people to hear the sad tales of a celebrity, such as it is. But it is a little alarming. I mean, it does change your life in many ways.
Yeah, imagine. So the next subject that I wanted to talk about tonight was in regards to an article that you wrote last year for the, I want to say it was for the Foundation for Economic Education.
Yeah, you're talking about my humanitarianism versus brutalism.
Yeah, the against libertarian brutalism, which seems to have caused... well, I don't really know if it was any kind of controversy, but it was a controversy. I try to write something every day, and it's true that article took me 2 or 3 days to kind of think through entirely, but it was kind of exciting for me because something had bothered me a little bit about a tendency I had observed in libertarianism to be excessively reductionist, as if the long history of liberty and its social and cultural and historical context didn't really matter much, that you could really just and should reduce the idea of liberty to just a 1 or 2 tiny points of strict political doctrine, and that it's wrong to extend it beyond that. To have higher aspirations for, the beautification of society or the liberation of humanity or the empowerment of people or whatever. Any kind of positive vision is sort of ruled out in this tendency that it's just don't tread on me, and it doesn't go any further than that. And the problem with that is that it doesn't establish very good parameters for what constitutes a kind of a longing that's compatible with
the liberal tradition broadly considered, by which I mean going all the way back to the High Middle Ages. And so, and when I discovered this architectural school, post-war, really, I found a rough analogy there. It's an architectural school that wanted to build buildings that were purely functional and opposed beautification, emendation, and elaboration as a matter of principled aesthetics and ethics. And I thought, well, there's a tendency of that same thing within the libertarian world. And the reason I knew it so well and I drew such a vivid picture is that I was able to look inside myself and see that, well, there have been times in my own understanding of what liberty is where I kind of gravitated toward an excessively reductionist view myself. So I began to reflect on the writings of the great libertarians like Bastiat and Mises and my old friend Murray. And what I saw was a broad vision and an aspiration for what society was capable of becoming under conditions of liberty. And there seemed to be a kind of an ethos that was aspirational there. That's missing in an overly reductionist view of libertarianism. So I kind of decided to play a little mental game and a little intellectual game and develop these two archetypes. One, a humanitarian, aspirational kind of libertarianism. The other, a brutalist libertarianism, by analogy to the architectural school. So that's what the article laid out and presented. And it completely shocked me just how viral that article became. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, the fact that you're asking me about it now, basically a year later, is kind of interesting because I probably have written, since then, probably close, to 300 articles.
You mentioned just a few minutes ago. You mentioned Christopher Cantwell.
Yes,
he actually wrote an article about your article, and one of the points he made is it seems like he's claimed that you were flirting with leftism. Yeah,
I don't know what that means really. I wish I knew what that means so that I could figure out if it's true. If I think and Chris isn't alone in this. So this is part of the strange aspect of brutalism that I still don't entirely understand is that like Chris Cantwell definitely has a cultural agenda of his own, and it's and if you can judge based on his, because after I wrote my article, then all this brutalist movement popped up, and one of the failings of my piece is that I gave the really cool name to the people I was opposing and the slightly lame name to the people I was favoring. So suddenly there emerged this brutalist movement. I'm a brutalist. And but I mean, these brutalist groups, and it was totally expected. It wasn't a shock to me. They immediately became misogynistic and racially tinged, and it was in many cases anti-Semitic, and all this sort of ugly side of humanity.
It's kind of liberty for me, but not for thee.
Right, it's something like that. Yeah, it's very, very strange, and it's like, and also just sort of a little bit attached to sort of taboo breaking for its own sake, and and I don't know, and it's tiresome, really, and that sort of angry hysteria, define. I'm all for defying civic conventions. I think that's great. But to be outright mean and nasty and malevolent is probably, let's just say there's a tension between things like racism, misogyny, and anti-Semitism, and the liberal tradition. That's all. And that I don't think that is leftism.
Well, a lot of the criticisms that I've seen against that article all seem to be somewhat focused on a specific paragraph in that article.
Oh yeah, which is that the one about?
It's the one where you describe the town that is taken over by fundamentalists,
right,
and exclude certain people based on arbitrary reasons.
Right.
But everyone who lives there is there voluntarily.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. That you're right. That I've seen a lot of criticism because you're reading the article and you're kind of going along and you're like, well, this is interesting, this is fascinating, it's a good theory, but how does it apply? And then finally, I get to an actual application, and it's sort of very vividly drawn, and then people recoiled at that paragraph, and I think in some ways, I recently read the article, and I must say I was extremely pleased with it. I thought it was a very very good piece, and I was very happy with it. That paragraph is probably the weakest aspect of the entire article in some ways, and I feel like I didn't connect it well enough to the rest of it.
I got to be frank that the first time I read it, it kind of left me with a question. And interestingly enough, the question that I had is what seems to be the main concern over these people that are criticizing that paragraph, is that this type of society would of course be defended by the brutalist, but the question is, how would, if you want to call it a humanitarian libertarian, how would they handle a society like this? I mean, I guess the question is, it gets down to whether or not, if you're a humanitarian libertarian,
right,
are you going to use the state to try to correct the society?
Yeah.
And
that
not,
is a
how
very
would you
valid
correct a society like that.
Right, and that's a very valid point you're making, and I think it's one that's raised by the weaknesses of the way in which I wove that paragraph into the article, and I could see why it kind of rattled people, because if I'm advancing humanitarianism, the question is, well, what if you have a small community where people just, quite frankly, don't give a flying leap for a humanitarianism, right? What does the humanitarian do in that case? Do we invade? Do we And of course, the answer to that is absolutely not. What you want is maximum diversity and decentralization, and that means, of course, small enclaves of what might be a completely authoritarian style order, exactly as the type that I constructed there. I get what my point was, that is to say that that's not what we should aspire to, and that the ethos that's alive in a community like that is not the liberal ethos, and that if you have a fully free society, there'll be a trajectory towards kind of universalizing a commercial spirit, and one that's ever more liberal. But for me to have implied that somehow, humanitarianism would be against the rights of that community to exist was really wrong. I mean, really wrong.
Right. I knew there was something more to it, but I read it and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And maybe you should write a part 2.
Well, I think that I could have fixed that problem with just a little bit more of integration with the paragraph before and the paragraph after, or maybe drop that paragraph and come up with a better example or something like that. What I was trying to do was to illustrate that the liberal aspiration is something that really does seek and desire a kind of a flourishing society and as a universal norm. And I think actually we've seen this. I mean, a good example of this is like with free trade. Like the more globalized the economy is, the more Western styles and Western ideas are pervading the whole of the world, and I don't think that that's something entirely to regret. I think that's probably a good thing, Yeah. And the brutalists might look at that and say, "Oh, this is bad. We need these sort of walled utopias of authoritarian rule, and insofar as they're not invading their neighbors, then that's nothing to regret." And I guess my view is that if you have any abuse of power at any level of society in any way, like a real abuse of power, that is always something that the liberal spirit should regret in some way. Which is not to say that therefore there should be a coercive apparatus used against it. But it's something we should always regret. Now, let me clarify here, though, too. And that was the other slightly regrettable thing about the image I drew there. I did not mean to cast any kind of aspersions or even doubt on people who voluntarily enter as adults into communities of interest that are structured in a hierarchical way, and by which I would refer to things like monasteries or convents or these kinds of communities, because these are really purely voluntary orders. I mean, they're not structured like commercial societies. They're very different from the mall that you have in the downtown district of your city. But they express a different kind of value system. And yeah, I mean, to the extent that paragraph depreciated, that sort of institution, I very much regret it.
Yeah, I mean, it really took a great article overall and just kind of, I wouldn't say made it worse or made it bad, just kind of made it a
little confusing. Yeah, because it was a great. I was very pleased with the article, and I regret putting that in. And it's funny because I guess as I approach the end, as a writer, you kind of go through this. You're like, okay, I've laid out a really pretty theory, but I bet the reader is kind of looking for a really concrete application you can really sink your teeth into. And that was the one that sort of I generated in my mind, and yet it ended up being the one that confused people the most.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm glad we were able to clear that up, and hopefully people that were detracting the article can.
Well, it's funny because
make sense out of it too.
I had people write me and say, "Oh, that means you're against convents." Well, what's funny about it is that I spent over the last 10 years, I've traveled around to monasteries and convents myself, teaching Gregorian chant. Because that's a weird aspect of my life that I happen to be something of a specialist in this topic, to monks and nuns in these communities, and I've been unfailingly happy or impressed by the joy and the happiness and the piety and the beauty of those kind of self-contained communities. I think they're very beautiful. I must say too that I've been very impressed by the in the old-fashioned sense of the term, their liberality. They tend to be very beautiful and exciting, wonderful, happy places to live. And probably And it's funny, as a writer, you kind of go through this. As I reread that paragraph, I thought, what if I read that from the point of view of somebody who was very attached to a local, religious sect and something like that? I mean, would I be offended? And I guess when I wrote it, I hadn't really thought of it from that point of view entirely. And if I had, I would have clarified it and come up with probably a better explanation.
Yeah.
That's the thing about a writer. It's funny. People always treat your stuff as I don't know, like some sort of codified
right. Like this is canon law for the libertarians.
Yeah, I know, right? And it's too high a standard for any writer. I mean, like in my case, It's funny. This is one of the reasons people have a difficult time writing, and one of the reasons I love running Liberty.me is that I'm trying to inspire people to write more. But people get scared to write because their thoughts are not complete,
Right.
And I decided very early on in my life, I thought, I'm going to chronicle the development of my ideas in real time, even if that means risks to me, even if I change my mind. And I've never been afraid to change my mind, and to learn and to put those new thoughts out there. In fact, I like doing that. To me, intellectual life is about the journey, not so much the conclusion. It's the adventure of discovery that makes ideas writing truly wonderful. And readers need to read that way. You know, they should read an author as a person in the process of discovering new thoughts and having new insights, and hoping that writer will help you similarly gain new insights. I think this is the right way. You should go on a journey with the readers. And that Brutalism article, like, the thing that pleased me most about it is that it really did kind of cause a lot of people to think really hard about these issues. And I mean, even if they didn't agree with me entirely, and even if I didn't entirely agree with me, you know, then that's okay, because we need that kind of those sort of ideas out there so that we think harder and think more broadly and think more thoroughly. And the more we're thinking about this topic of human liberty, the more we're helping to build it, I believe.
I totally agree. I have one last question, and I'm not really sure how I should word this question, but would you consider yourself to be a constitutionalist?
You know, that was one of the questions on the quiz, like, which libertarian are you? And I can't really say that I am. Really, I don't think the Constitution was a good idea. It created a government out of a world where there wasn't a government. It was supposed to be self-limiting, but it didn't really work. You know,
because there's a lot of talk lately. I don't know if you've heard any of it, but a lot of people are talking about the solution is to hold an Article 5 constitutional convention. And
I know.
All others would just say, just leave it as it is, and, you know, strictly adhere to it, and that would be the solution.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, you know, the great problem with constitutions is that ultimately it's a piece of parchment, and the party responsible to adhering to it is the same one you're trying to limit. Right. So it's a kind of fallacy. I think the framers were not all badly intended in that sense, but the classical liberals of the time were desperately trying to figure out how to limit government, and they thought that one way would be to get rid of the monarchy, you know, and replace it with a kind of elected republic or democracy. They hadn't had any experience to know that actually that carries with its own dangers, and I think we've learned since that time. I'm always fascinated to go back and read Alexis de Tocqueville's account of American democracy, written in 1830s and 1840s. You know. Because he just nails it. You know, he gets the exact process by which a democracy becomes a despotism, and he forecasts so much. It's a beautiful book.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, we're actually out of time. I want to thank you for coming on the show. It was really fun talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Sometime.
Yeah, I enjoyed the chance to stretch out and just lay out my thoughts. So thank you so much.
All right. Thanks for coming on, Jeff.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. So that was Jeffrey Tucker here on Liberty Unfiltered. We're coming to the end here. So come back next week, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, here on Vigilant Liberty Radio. And don't forget that we are also being streamed over on K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network. Next week, our conversation is whether or not religion and liberty are compatible. And I'll have a few friends joining me for that discussion. So that's it for me. Thanks for tuning in, folks.
Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the
This show is copyright by VLR Media. All opinions of hosts, panelists, and guests are their own and may not reflect the opinion of VLR Media or anyone else.